Silent battlefields, where historic photos whisper the untold stories of war and human memory. In April 1942, after the daring Doolittle raid, Lieutenant Colonel James Doolittle appeared with his crew alongside Chinese officials in a significant historical moment. The photo taken in China shows Zhao Fuqi, party secretary of the West Zhejiang provincial government, standing on the right. This is a testament to the close cooperation between the Allies and the Chinese resistance forces in the war against Japan. In early 1945, a U.S. Air Force P-51 Mustang fighter jet soared from the runway on Iwo Jima on a mission to escort and protect long-term bombing missions into Japanese territory. With its superior speed and long range, the P-51 became a steel shield in the sky, effectively supporting B-29s in the final fierce phase of World War II, helping to shape the absolute superiority of the Allies. In May 1945, during the brutal Battle of Okinawa, U.S. Marines advanced through a devastated village, reduced to rubble and devastation by bombs and shells. Amid the devastation, the lifeless body of a Japanese soldier lay on the ground, a tragic symbol of sacrifice and despair. The image reflected not only the brutality of the battle, but also the brutal price borne by both sides in World War II. In March 1945, during the fierce Battle of Iwo Jima, an American M4 Sherman tank suddenly stopped in the middle of a smoky battlefield. Surrounding it were the heavy traces of the fighting, crushed earth, thick smoke, and the echoes of bombs that had not yet subsided. The Sherman, the symbol of Allied armored power, stood both resilient and alone, reflecting the extreme harshness and tension of this historic battle. In March 1945, during the fierce Battle of Iwo Jima, the United States Marines deployed a mobile rocket launcher on the fiery battlefield. The heavy equipment operated in the rugged volcanic terrain, unleashing devastating volleys of fire that flattened fortified Japanese bunkers. The image of steadfast soldiers manning the launcher amid earth-shattering explosions clearly depicted the fierceness and destructive power of this historic battle. In April 1945, on the bloody island of Iwo Jima, the exhausted Japanese soldiers were finally forced to surrender to the United States Marines. After weeks of desperate fighting in underground bunkers and tunnels, they emerged, dismayed, abandoning their weapons under the watchful eyes of American soldiers. The scene marked the end of one of the most brutal battles of World War II, where resilience was defeated by overwhelming force. In 1928, the aircraft carrier Kaga of the Imperial Japanese Navy was equipped and completed, becoming a symbol of naval power at that time. The highlight was the system of long, curved funnels located right below the flight deck, a design rarely seen in naval history. On the deck, 3 heavy 8-inch guns were arranged in solid gun mounts, demonstrating the ambition to combine traditional artillery firepower with the ability to deploy air power. On May 11, 1937, the Imperial Japanese Navy aircraft carrier Kaga conducted air operations, demonstrating the country's growing naval power. On board, a series of fighters and bombers were prepared: Mitsubishi B-2M Type 89, Nakajima A-2N Type 90, and Aichi D-1A-1 Type 94. The bustling scene of pilots and sailors showed close coordination, signaling that Kaga was an important platform in the ambition to conquer the Pacific skies. On March 15, 1939, the heavy footsteps of the German army echoed through the cobblestone streets of Prague, the capital of Czechoslovakia. Long lines of soldiers in their distinctive gray uniforms and steel helmets marched in neat rows, rifles slung over their shoulders, into the city center, as the locals watched in bewilderment and helplessness. The invasion marked the end of Czechoslovak independence, as the small country was quickly swallowed up by the massive Nazi war machine. The image of the army marching into Prague became a haunting testament to Hitler's unstoppable expansion in the early years of World War II. In a rare photograph taken at Buchenwald concentration camp, Claire Booth Luce, a famous American politician and diplomat, is seen visiting the prison hospital. Here, she directly talked to Nazi prisoners suffering from tuberculosis, who were part of the cruel death machine. In the gloomy scene, the dialogue was not only humane, but also a testament to the confrontation with the terrible crimes of the fascist regime. On January 29, 1945, in Binalonan, Pangasinan, Luzon, American soldiers, in conjunction with Filipino resistance forces, inspected the scene after a fierce battle. Before them were two Japanese Hago light tanks that had been shot down, lying motionless in the dust of the battlefield. Inside, the Japanese crew members had died, leaving a clear evidence of the Japanese Army's defeat in the campaign to liberate the Philippines. While many soldiers in the war sought the glory of aerial combat rather than the harsh realities of ground combat, pilots were also forced to endure countless horrors in the skies. Mechanical failures leading to engine failure were not uncommon, and those lucky enough to avoid being shot down in a skirmish were also vulnerable to mid-air collisions, as was the case with this unfortunate pilot. Around 1946, renowned photographer Richard Peterson captured a haunting moment on a small village road near Dresden, Germany. In the photo, two World War II veterans who had lost both legs were slowly moving on old wooden crutches. Over one of their shoulders was a bulky backpack, which appeared to be full of potatoes, a precious food during the post-war famine. The photo clearly depicts the physical pain and harshness of life after the war. On September 1, 1939, in the free city of Danzig, Poland, German police and customs officers recreated the dismantling of the Polish border checkpoint at Sopot. This iconic image marked the beginning of the Nazi invasion of Poland and the beginning of World War II. What seemed like a small border gate dismantling became a signal of the global tragedy that was about to unfold. Around September 18, 1944, in the newly liberated Belgian town of Aalst, a soldier of the Irish Guard smiled as he accepted a cigar from a local resident. In the jubilant atmosphere after long days of occupation, the small gift became a symbol of gratitude and joy of reunion. This simple yet emotional image depicts the warm military-civilian relationship amid the flames of World War II. In April 1942, at Fort Riley, Kansas, an American soldier was riding a motorcycle messenger for his platoon of motorized cavalry reconnaissance units. Through the lens of photographer Jack Delano of the United States Office of War Information, the image exuded pride and determination. The dusty motorcycle, neat uniform and focused eyes portrayed the spirit of readiness to serve the fatherland during the fierce period of World War II. In May 1945, in Germany, the Allies were shocked by the horrific scene when they opened the train cars carrying prisoners from the concentration camps. Inside, many emaciated bodies, wrapped in thin blankets, lay motionless after a deadly journey, probably on their way to Ludwigslust. The American soldiers stood silently, witnessing with their own eyes the grisly evidence of Nazi crimes. The image became an undeniable testament to the terrible brutality of the Holocaust. At Belsen concentration camp in 1945, after its liberation by the Allies, German civilians were forced to witness and participate in the cleanup of the horrific atrocities. Under gunfire and bayonet watch, they collected the emaciated bodies of prisoners, leaving them scattered across the campgrounds. Their faces, frightened and terrified, reflected the stark reality they had previously tried to ignore. The scene became a painful reminder of silence in the face of atrocities. During the Leipzig massacre, a political prisoner collapsed against a barbed wire fence, his body charred and bleeding after being shot in the head. He and hundreds of Poles, French, Russians, and Czechs were imprisoned in Stalag Tekla, where the SS doused the camp with flammable liquid and set it on fire with bazookas. As the flames raged, anyone who tried to escape was machine-gunned down. 350 innocent lives were burned and slaughtered in that horrific nightmare. In the Belsen concentration camp, 31-year-old Margit Schwartz, a Jew from Budapest, was a pale shadow of life. Her body was in pain, so thin that it was skin and bones. Her mind was hazy and broken. Even though she was almost insane and had to be fed and turned over by nurses, she still had an extraordinary moment. She struggled to stand up from her bed, her trembling hands holding on to the iron frame, recreating almost exactly the appearance of an old photograph, the last meaningful memento in her fragmented memory. A victim of the 1945 atomic bomb explosion in Japan has horrific burns in the shape of a nuclear burn pattern. The wounds trace the exact shadow of the kimono the victim was wearing at the moment of terror. The intense heat and radiation from the explosion imprinted the fabric's pattern onto his body, turning his skin into a painful replica of his clothes. The scene is both horrifying and haunting, revealing the inhumanity of nuclear weapons. During the Lüneburg war crimes trial, which exposed the horrors of the Belsen concentration camp, Major General von Lochow, a former German Wehrmacht officer, was allowed to attend. In the photo, he appears without a hat, standing on the left, answering reporters. In front of the camera, the general insisted that he and many other German generals had absolutely no knowledge of the existence of Belsen and other gruesome concentration camps. For much of the war, the Germans had absolute air dominance. The mighty and fearsome Luftwaffe, commanded by Hermann Göring, was the largest and most powerful air force in World War II. They had devastated London during the Battle of Britain. Here, however, the British got at least a small measure of revenge, bombing German-held Abbeville airfield in France. Terror came in all forms during World War II, and sometimes even being with your comrades was frightening. Here, a Russian soldier hopes that the ground around his trench will not be better occupied by a massive Russian T-34 tank during the Battle of Kursk, fought between German and Soviet forces in July and August 1943. War is hell. It can turn good, kind people into savage monsters, capable of untold destruction, torture, and inhumanity. Yet sometimes humanity wins out, as in the case of this German soldier who chose to give part of his rations to a starving Russian prisoner of war and her daughter. Although it looked as if Georges Blind, the man facing a barrage of German rifles in this photograph, was about to be executed, it was all a lie. The Germans were merely trying to extract information from Blind, a member of the French resistance. When Blind refused to reveal their intentions, the guns were lowered, and he was instead sent to a concentration camp, where he died almost immediately. In this iconic photograph, British prisoner of war Horace Greasley stares down one of the Nazi Party's leading figures, Heinrich Himmler. Here, Himmler is touring one of the many active German prisoner of war camps. He was the leader of the Nazis' notorious SS and the chief overseer of the concentration camps that systematically murdered millions of people. In the Allied effort to liberate the Pacific from Japanese control, an island-hopping strategy was employed, which saw the Allies systematically gain control of several key Japanese-held islands. One of these was Okinawa. Although the Allies ultimately won, the victory was difficult, and Japan's determination to fight to the end in this conflict was one of the reasons why the atomic bomb was ultimately deemed necessary. In the midst of the fierce battle at the Battle of Peleliu, which lasted from September to November 1944, the U.S. Marines took a rare break after clearing the battlefield. They sat on the hot ground, their backs covered in sweat, quietly lighting cigarettes to dispel their fatigue. The image not only depicts resilience but also shows the human moment in the midst of the brutal storm of war. On April 12, 1945, in the Merkers salt mine in Germany, General Dwight D. Eisenhower, Supreme Allied Commander, and General Omar N. Bradley, commander of the 12th Army Group, carefully examined a suitcase filled with precious silver. This was part of the huge booty hidden by the Nazis. That moment clearly reflected the brutality of war and the secrets that the Allies gradually discovered. In March 1945, in the midst of the fierce Battle of Iwo Jima, a Boeing B-29 heavy bomber was forced to make an emergency landing on a runway filled with smoke and flames. Immediately after touching down, the giant plane burst into flames, turning into a fireball in the middle of the battlefield. The image was both tragic and heroic, reflecting the extreme harshness of war and the sacrifices that air crews had to face in each mission. In May 1945, a squadron of U.S. Air Force B-29 strategic bombers streaked across the skies of Japan, carrying out a devastating mission against the port city of Yokohama. Incendiary bombs were dropped, showering densely populated neighborhoods with crimson flames, turning them into vast seas of fire. The raid had a devastating impact, destroying much of the infrastructure and inflicting heavy casualties on Japanese civilians. A USF B-25B Mitchell medium bomber, one of 16 aircraft participating in the Doolittle raid, takes off from the deck of USS Hornet to conduct an airstrike on the Japanese home islands, April 18, 1942. Around 1945, a Douglas A-20 Havoc light bomber of the United States Army Air Force, USAAF, was captured in majestic moments in the sky. With its compact yet powerful design, the A-20 Havoc was a formidable weapon in ground attack and nighttime bombing campaigns. This aircraft played an important role in supporting infantry, destroying strategic targets, and asserting American air power at the end of World War II. In April 1942, in the waters of the North Pacific, Navy Lieutenant Mark A. Mitcher, captain of the aircraft carrier USS Hornet, was captured in history holding important orders. He posed for a photograph with Lieutenant Commander James Doolittle and his crew, who were about to embark on a daring air raid on Japanese territory. The image marked the brave spirit that opened the famous Doolittle raid. In February 1942, in Singapore, Britain's impregnable citadel in the Far East, British, Australian, and Indian soldiers were forced to surrender to the Japanese army after days of fierce fighting. In their mud-stained uniforms, they silently bowed their heads before the enemy's guns. This event marked the most humiliating defeat in British military history, with more than 80,000 soldiers taken prisoner, and paved the way for Japan to control all of Southeast Asia at the height of World War II. In the final days of World War II, Hitler desperately relied on the fledgling youth force from the Hitler Youth, turning them into reluctant soldiers on the bloody battlefield. In the photo, he appears with a cold gaze, gently touching the face of a boy who had just been awarded a medal, as if to instill blind faith in them. These young faces, not yet 20 years old, were caught up in the vortex of propaganda, becoming human shields for a regime about to collapse. This is a tragic testament to the exploitation of youth in the frenzy of war. In the dimly lit train station, a sailor hurriedly gave his lover a passionate farewell kiss before the train rolled away. The girl stood on tiptoe, hugging him tightly through the train window, as if holding on to the last bit of warmth in the short moment. All around, silent eyes watched, filled with sympathy. The photo captured not only a farewell kiss, but also a symbol of love, sacrifice, and the pain of separation in war, where every encounter could be the last. The introduction of the American gas mask in combat. To protect troops from chemical attacks, the United States issued gas masks widely. Training ensured that soldiers could quickly put on masks when attacked. This protective device saved many lives in the mustard gas environment. Masks became an essential part of combat gear. Their use marked a new era in chemical warfare defense. Marta Lobelt, the operator, Gertrude Reinhold, Irene Haschke, and Anneliese Coleman, shortly after their arrest in Bergen-Belsen, May 2, 1945. The first three were dressed in Nazi uniforms, while Coleman wore an ill-fitting male uniform, because when she was arrested, she was wearing a prisoner's uniform to disguise herself as a Jewish woman. May 2, 1945. Before the outbreak of World War II, there were several international laws prohibiting the mistreatment of prisoners of war, POWs. However, these laws were often bent or completely ignored as the war continued. Here, Sikh prisoners awaited their untimely deaths at the hands of their Japanese captors. While all participating nations violated the rules to some extent regarding the treatment of POWs, most historians agree that the Japanese were the worst offenders. Even in history's darkest hours, there were glimmers of kindness and humanity. And though many prisoners and casualties of war were brutally treated or left for dead, some were given a rare second chance at the hands of the enemy. Such luck befell this newborn baby, carried to safety by an American soldier after the Battle of Saipan.